You're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, as promised, this is the February 11th Utilities Committee meeting. And we'll get started as the normal routine by establishing the presence of a quorum. And in fact, we not only have a quorum, we have every member of the Utilities Committee. The next step would be to approve the minutes of the January 11th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those?
I'll move they be accepted.
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? I have none. Okay.
Hey, I just would like to have one friendly amendment in the minutes.
Okay.
In the challenges section below, it says including I&I, which is described as infiltration and intrusion. And the correct term is inflow and infiltration. So if that could be changed, just so that if future generations are reading this, we will be talking about the same thing that they know.
Don pointed that out to me, and I read it multiple times and did not process the difference. It looked exactly the same to me, even though it was spelled out in front of me. Again, thanks, Don. If you will, David, would you take a few moments to review the progress on the water main construction? I know it was covered the other night in the meeting, but maybe there's been a little more progress. Bring us up to date, please.
With pleasure. So the crews are finishing up a few. I spoke to Kevin Bell this morning. I believe 5 remaining connections on Sharon. The Little Creek subdivision and Glen Meadow subdivisions were completed yesterday. So those are finished. The remaining connections should be finished this week. There's a potential they might need to go into early next week, but it affects very few residents, so they're being notified directly. Following that, the contractor will be restoring sections of Sharon that are currently plated, and we'll be wrapping up our work hopefully in the next couple of weeks. If we do have to wait for any asphalt, that will of course come when the weather is more cooperative for the production of it. But work is coming to the end.
Well, that's good. A question, when that work is finished, I assume it won't be necessary to have additional bacteria testing, et cetera, and water boiling requirements.
So there is currently a boil advisory in place for those residents on Little Creek and Glen Meadow. They received door hangers indicating such. Those will hopefully be lifted here in the next few days when we receive boil samples. Following that, though, we do not anticipate any further boil advisories related to the water main work.
Okay, I didn't know whether that was going to be a routine necessity or not. As you are aware, there's a lot of social comment on the various platforms. Thank you, David. Would you show that chart A for me, please, David? And this is just basically information.
Jeff,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Before you show the chart, I had 1 or 2 questions for David, just to make sure I'm understanding it. When is the anticipated completion of the Sharon Road water main project, and will that completion include a repaved Sharon Road? I know we've talked about this over and over, but I'm not quite clear where things are. If that includes.
I'm sorry. I was to say, I'd be happy to provide some clarity on that. So right now, the contractor is excavating certain portions of Sharon Road. I know a lot of members of the public have unfortunately been subject to the traffic interruptions along Sharon. Hopefully those won't have to last much longer than early next week as they complete this. So they have some of those areas plated as they wait to restore Sharon Road in those sections. The complete repave of Sharon Road is a different project that we'll be pursuing later on this year. We'll have several sources of, of grant funding to make the bottom line, so to speak, on that against the village less. So that project we're anticipating for later on in 2021, and that would reach through the entirety of Sharon Road, including where we're doing the work now.
Thank you.
Anything else, Marilyn?
No, not on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The chart I put up basically is informative and relative to some extent to the OPEPA directive, the action required called the CMON. And the graph simply, there are two graphs. This one that you're looking at overlays the amount of water that's processed by the wastewater plant. And although we bill 100 million a year in terms of gallons of water, you can see that the amount of wastewater, which is water that's infiltrating, right, Don? That's infiltrating the sewer system, is considerably more than the water plant produces. So looking at basically the red line, which is last year, 2020, from January through December, you can see that it was a better year than some. The worst year, that blue line, is 2018. And you can see that in December, on the extreme edge of the graph there, in December, there were about 420 million gallons of water that went into the wastewater system that apparently comes from either other communities coming downhill or maybe leaking into our system because of water coming off of roofs. If you'll scroll down, please, David. This graph is essentially the same information, but rather than having 3 separate years, I just put 3 years together there. And you can see that looking at that, there are peaks, especially in the rainy seasons, where it obviously is water getting into the system because this illustrates just the totals, and it's greater, and we don't pump that much water in for gardens, for example, in October or in November, and then we have in January. You can see some peaks there. Anyway, that's just as a matter of providing some graphic, a visual of the problem with wastewater getting into the system, and that's what causes the OEPA to issue a directive with which the village must comply. So with that, then, David, could you kind of give me a little bit of progress on that particular action?
Absolutely. So the CMON project is a multi-year pursuit. We're working with our engineering firm, EES, who the village has worked with for quite some time, to provide the planning and scheduling as well as loan funding for the required steps of the CMON. There are 3 steps of a CMON process. The first is the planning stage, then it's followed by the design stage, and then it's concluded by the construction phase. The CMON does not always require construction. There is a planning and design phase for other maybe changes to certain procedures for the processing of wastewater or those sorts of things. So those are yet to come. as of February of this year, we have requested a planning loan for the total of not just shy of $90,000. So we should be receiving that loan here in the beginning of 2021. EES will use that to complete a couple of engineering services for us. The two main ones are GIS mapping of our water and wastewater lines. The second is televising certain areas of the village and identifying potential areas where rainwater, stormwater is infiltrating our system. So that loan funding is 0% loan. Council approved that funding. I believe it was in December. Someone's feel free to correct me if I misspoke on that. The next stage comes in August. That will be when we begin our design loan application. That design will be based on the results of the planning phase. And then we hopefully will receive that loan funding by the end of the year this year. And then the construction phase will begin in mid 2022. Once we have identified projects and designed projects to complete.
David,
Sure.
can I ask a question here?
Absolutely.
First of all, this wastewater chart that Jeff has up right now, by no means sewerage. A lot of times people have looked at these charts and assumed that this was sewer water that we're treating, and it actually is, it doesn't necessarily mean it's sewer water and that we're overflowing our sewer. What it does do, and the prime example is from June through July when the heavy rains hit, we're treating both sewer and runoff water.
Correct.
And that's why every once in a while we overflow, because we're trying to treat clean water along with the sewer water that's going into that same pipe. That's
Correct.
what has to be corrected.
That's correct. And I want to clarify something that's been said repeatedly, is that the EPA has identified our plant as being able to process a certain maximum amount of water and of wastewater. And when it violates that, when it goes over that amount, the EPA does issue a violation. They phrase it as a violation, but it's phrased as such because it means that our plant is treating more water than it's designed to be able to treat. Now, the village is working closely with the EPA. Obviously, the CMOM project is an example of that. So while the word violation can be scary, it's simply EPA language to let us know that our plant is processing more water than it's designed to. And with the CMOM project, we're aiming to overcome that and remove that as much as possible. Okay,
can I ask one more question before I see Marilyn trying to jump in here? I'm sorry.
Yes.
But the plans for correction are going to have to follow the identification of the problem.
Absolutely.
So the CMOM is going to basically point out where our problems are and give us some suggestions on how to fix the inflow that's coming in the wastewater treatment plant.
Absolutely correct, sir.
I am correct. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, Marilyn, your turn.
All right, now, David, I just want to go back and get clarity. I recall in November, council authorized an application for a grant or loan or something or other for comprehensive planning for the CMOM.
Correct.
And as I recall, there was a plan of action with loose timeframes and dates attached to that. And one of those dates was that we, the village, would receive a decision on the loan or grant for comprehensive planning And this decision would be made by sometime around the end of July. So when you say that we will receive the grant, is that to say that the grant or loan, whichever it was, has been approved?
So I would want to verify with our engineers where we are exactly in that process. But based on the application we submitted to the Ohio EPA, the office there is the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, DEFA for short, we've identified through our engineers an application for a planning loan for February of this year with a project completion date of the end of August of this year. So in between those two dates is when we will work with our engineers to identify the planning steps and complete the planning work. So I can certainly get more specific dates between those two if you'd like.
Well, I'm just wondering if we've been approved for the loan or the grant.
Yes, I have not heard that we have not been. So the loan funding is going to be available to us to complete that work.
Well, have we heard that it has been approved? I think that's my question.
I can certainly confirm that, but I have not heard from our engineers that there's a question that it wouldn't be approved, if that makes sense.
I do understand what you're saying. You're saying that you've not heard of any question around the application.
Correct.
But on the other hand, we've not heard that the application has been approved and the money is forthcoming. And with what strings attached to it, what we'll need to do, and how we'll need to prioritize matters.
Absolutely, yes. So I can finalize that information and follow up with the committee in an email.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the committee I know from my perspective, I'm very interested in monitoring our responses and actions to Ohio EPA. And that's the first step for me. Thanks.
Of course.
If I may, the CMOM, it basically is a standard operating procedure guide where they check to make sure that the facility is following all the necessary rules, taking the necessary actions, et cetera. It's a procedures guide. And it does, in that action, that CMOM itself does not identify the sources of the intrusions. That's something that goes along with and after in the process of CMOM. And that is not done by the same organization, as I understand it. David, is that correct? And the actual identification, the actual, I think you said the GIS, the inspections of lines, that is done by another agency or another organization.
Well, we have our engineers securing contract pricing for those services as part of the planning phase of the CMOM.
Okay, they will get bids. I
Yes.
assume. They'll tell us our options.
Yeah, they will within the loan funding that we are anticipating receiving, they will secure those necessary services for us.
I'm aware that Wally had written contacted the engineers and has had discussions with them. At this point, we don't have a timeline established for this. I'd like to ask that we set that as a target, an objective, and that is to start, when will the engineers be active, when will they be complete, what stages there will be as we move towards making some progress on that.
I can provide a loose timeline now.
Let me ask that we defer that to another time so we don't introduce more detail in the meeting than we actually need. But I'd like to see to have that timeline and an action plan for the whole process, if that's acceptable.
Okay, the timeline that I reviewed beginning in February of 2021 and concluding in mid 2022 is where we currently are. So more details will be coming forward once we identify planning projects.
But that includes, for example, the GIS, the
Yes.
inspections, okay?
Yes, that's part of the first planning phase.
Can we get a specific date progress as we move along, as opposed to saying it's a year from now? Let's have some
As that
benchmarks.
information becomes available, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions regarding OE, EPA, directive, et cetera? Okay, thank you. Let's move on then to the, I call it water displacement. We've talked about it in many meetings as water losses. And basically it's a water lost. Yes, Marilyn. Marilyn, you're muted, so I didn't.
Yeah, I'm trying to, it's easier to wave my hand than it is to figure out how to unmute all this stuff. We were having this discussion and I was just wondering if Don had anything to add to it, since he's the one that signed the letter that went to Ohio EPA back in November, which precipitated council's action. I just was wondering if Don had anything to add to this part of our discussion and conversation.
Actually, I don't. I think, we're right now, the good news here is that EPA has, while they have sent us a notice requiring that we do certain things, they are satisfied that we have shown sufficient attention to the problem that they are willing to work with us. We are not the only wastewater treatment facility that has this kind of a problem. And EPA recognizes that we are necessary to our respective cities and villages. And unless they see a real safety problem for residents, they are going to continue to work with us, which they're doing. We had a conference call with them just I think before we signed that letter, and explain, and we all agreed on what we were going to do. And it starts with the developing the CMOM, which they recognize that's a good thing. We have added to that not just wastewater, but the water lines as well. So we will end up with a full map of the water and wastewater lines within the village, which will then be very helpful to us in identifying problems within the system, which is to say leaks.
You still there, Marilyn?
I think you said thank you, Marilyn. And so
I did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I did not hear it. Okay, back again to the water displacement. We have talked on multiple meetings, about the fact that we have excessive loss and would like to get that, and need to get that down to a acceptable and what might be considered normal level of loss. And that normal level is through leakage, it's through backwash of the water system, it's through testing fire hydrants. But typically it's expected to be about 15% of your total production. We've talked many times about how we address that, and that is testing for small leaks, checking the water meters, etc. So if you could share with us, David, what progress, if any, we've made. And I would like to ask that we establish an action plan for that so that we can get to a target of, let's say, the beginning of 2024. That's 1, 2, 3 years to get to a goal of 15% or so of loss.
So as of right now, there is no concrete action plan set in place. And the only reason for that is because our entire attention has been dedicated to two projects. That's the CMOM project as mandated by the EPA and the water main replacement along Sharon Avenue. So those projects have taken priority for us over the last several years, especially the water main work. So there is no action plan as of yet. Once the work is complete with the water main, that will free up staff time and will free up engineering availability to pursue any kind of planning for leak detection. I know in whatever spare time he does have, Mr. Kevin Bell has gone out of his way to work with the Rural Water Authority as well as a contractor that the village has secured to identify leaks in our system. We also have leak detection equipment that we've identified. I believe it was, Mayor, you may know this number better than I do, 15 or so leaks in our system over the last year or so that have been repaired or been identified to be repaired. So as of right now, I would be hesitant to lock us into 15% by 2024, if only because we don't yet know the scope of the problem, but it is something that we will be addressing in the coming year once we've freed up staff time and engineering availability.
Well,
I would like to add a little bit to what David just said. I want to stress that this is an issue that we've been taking very seriously over the years. A few years ago, we invested in some new equipment that would allow us to detect leaks before the water starts bubbling out of the ground. And they mainly involved hooking up sensors to fire hydrants and then identifying where, when you've got two fire hydrants and there's a leak, then you hear a sound as the water is bubbling out of the pipe, even if it is not visible on the ground. We were able to find, and I want to say 10 or 12 leaks by just going through all of our village with that. We then, in connection with the Sharon Avenue main, we did a pressure test of the main leading from the plant to the main connection on Sharon Avenue. And we wanted to make sure that the water wasn't leaking there. And we concluded that it was not. We tested 12 meters chosen at random in order to find out, well, is the problem simply that the meters are not registering the water going through them properly? And we concluded the test showed that all 12 meters were performing normally. The recommendation from the testing facility was that that was sufficient evidence to say that we don't have, that our problem is not in our meters. Of course, the big step forward that we are taking is replacing the main itself on Sharon Avenue. I think it is highly likely from what people have said that there are a lot of leaks in that pipe that we don't know about because again, the water doesn't bubble up. Every now and then you have, suddenly one of these little pinhole leaks turns into a very big one. And like one that happened a while ago, it just basically emptied the entire water tower in a matter of an hour or so. We have, by replacing the main, we are eliminating that as a source of concern. I think the plan right now is we are going to continue using our own equipment to look for other leaks. And that is an ongoing process. And what happens is, even though we went through once and fixed all the leaks we could find, that doesn't mean new leaks haven't developed. It's highly likely that they will. So we will continue looking for any new leaks in our system. This is off Sharon Road, by the way. There damn well shouldn't be any leaks in Sharon Road. If there is, we're gonna be litigating. So we're going to continue doing that. In the meantime, we are going to take a very close look at the effect of the replacement of the Sharon Avenue main on our gap, and see what we find. The hope is that we will see a sizable shrinkage in the gap, namely between what we pump and what we bill. That's probably going to take a year's worth of data, at least, to really compare year to year and see what see what change there is. So like I say, during this next year, the main effort is going to be focused on the I&I problem with our wastewater treatment, but there will also be an ongoing effort to look for leaks outside of the Sharon Avenue main. I must say, just commenting on this, I admire the idea of setting a goal, but I think it needs to be recognized that it's going to be more aspirational than binding. And by that, I mean, until we really find out where the problem is, we can't determine how long it's going to take us to fix it. And you can say, yes, we want it done by 2024, but if we haven't found the problem by then, or let's say it turns out to be a huge problem that we didn't suspect, things can change. So yes, it is fine to set a stake in the ground, have an aspirational goal of getting this done by 2024, but I think everybody should be aware that that is aspirational and that it may take us longer than that.
Mr. Mayor, I don't necessarily agree with all of what you said, and so I'm going to address that if I may. Yes, I understand we have limited manpower, resources, etc., but we have, as we've discussed, there's a potential savings of $100,000 a year in processing costs of the water we produce. And to simply say, well, we'll wait on that is missing an opportunity to perhaps reduce that cost sooner than later. Wally, the administrator, has approved, as I understand it, the hiring of an additional person to the water plant, or to the utilities, the enterprise, which will increase the manpower by 33%. And some part of that additional manpower, I think, can be used to start to address some of these problems sooner. Yes, we do. Wally had pointed out that there was, I believe, a rural water company that did some testing for us at no cost, and they had some sophisticated equipment that would help identify small leaks. If we don't have that, then I think we ought to look at that as one of the costs of pursuing parallel both the CMOM and the location of our lost water. The CMOM is a procedures guide. I don't think that there's anything, and I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, but I don't think that there's going to be something that we haven't recognized we don't do somewhat routinely. It's not something entirely different. It's a matter of making sure we're complying with the OEPA. Yes, we have done leak tests, but we discussed this in the last meeting, and that is statistically sampling 12 out of 1,000 meters going to tell us that in fact, the meters are not a problem. We were told back in June of last year by the engineers that our meters are only good for 10 years. Then in a recent meeting, we were told, no, they're good for 15 years. Well, presently they're now all 16 years old. And whether we replace them soon or later is something that's going to happen. And I think looking at that as part of our long-term plan is something that should be done. And part of that plan is, yes, aspirational. Sure, we have aspirations, but sometimes aspirations don't turn into action. And I think that's important that we take a step towards saying we're going to do this, this, and this. And if there's any success, fine. If there's no success, move on to the next. But there needs to be something other than saying that this is to something we will do. We talked last summer, almost approaching, actually it was last, I'm not sure it was April, but I'm going to use that as a date. We're approaching a year on since we talked about, yes, we're going to have the water main in and it will reduce our leaks and that may solve our problem. And yet we're still another year away, as you just defined, in having a guide that you would feel comfortable with saying this is accurate and we are saving or we're not saving. So the net of it is that I would encourage us to look for something more specific than simply saying this is something we want to do.
Okay, I hope I wasn't implying that aspirational, but with the word aspirational, it was just like wishing and hoping. The whole point, my point was to set a goal to say that we will fix this problem by 2024 is aspirational. It is now we have a number of steps that we're going to take between now and 2024 to try to fix it. And I identified the one is continuing to look for leaks. You're right, you reminded me of the Rural Water Authority initiative also, which will bring in more sensitive testing even than the new testing that we got a few years ago. And that may well help us identify new leaks. And when we find leaks, we're going to fix them. So we are going to do stuff. We're going to take actions over the next, continuing to try to, address this problem. What I don't think we can commit to is saying that we're going to have it fixed by 2024.
I'm not suggesting that we commit to that. I'm suggesting that we set that as a target date and to identify the resources, manpower, money that are necessary to make that a reality rather than saying, well, we'd like to make it. Enough said. Any comments? Any other comments, please?
I'd like to expand on some of the comments that the mayor had made. The additional manpower in our utility department. Our utility department had been running at a reduced manpower until the hiring of the new employee later on this year. So bringing it to 4 individuals is to be bringing it back to a previous staffing level that had been reduced for several years. So there is plenty of work to go around and plenty of things that need to be done, as I'm sure Mr. Kevin Bell would attest to. Additionally, I would add that the CMOM project is so early on in its infancy that it is, I would be hesitant to dismiss it out of hand as simply an update to procedure. The work that we need to do is yet to be identified. It could be minimal, it could be large scale. The funding for that will be pursued through loan funding that we will need to rely on our revenues and cash balances coming in from our water and wastewater billing to be able to do that. And the same is true for water meter replacements. The cost of whole water meter replacements throughout the village is somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. with the upcoming CMOM project. That kind of an expense would be substantial against our fund balance. So I would be hesitant to pursue that unless we have concrete evidence that our meters are failing all over the village. So as of right now, I would agree that the 2024 goal is a good one, but it is a hopeful one. And the mayor's comment that it would be aspirational would be something I would agree with.
Very well.
If you prefer the word target rather than aspirational, I'm fine with that too.
I would agree with that too.
Yeah. Enough said for the moment.
I think what I'm hearing is that, and certainly we don't need to carry on a conversation around this, but what I'm hearing Jeff emphasize is that he's expressing the need for this to become more of a priority than what it seems to be. And for us to be able to monitor it and see some progress with it. Is that correct, Jeff?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I would point out that we have had progress. Data we've put together, and I believe, Jeff, I've shared this with you, that our water loss, I believe our engineer put it together earlier into 2020, that our water loss has reduced significantly over the last, I would say, 5 years or so. So it is high, and by no means is it a satisfactory level. We're right around 50% at my last recollection, but we were prior to that in the 60% range. So we have realized some reductions. We will continue to realize reductions, but enterprise, the operation of the utility is a long game. So it will require some time before we can complete these projects. We have to identify them first.
David, and to the committee, I would ask that if you could go back to the paperwork that I gave you in the previous committee meeting. There was the chart which we've used for a year that shows water losses, water pumped, water billed, etc. If you have that in your file, I could bring that screen up since if that's important. I agree that our losses are lower, but they are not significantly lower. In fact, I'm looking at the number as we speak, and our total lost gallons in 2020 were 70, I'm going to round it up, 77 million gallons lost. In 2019, it was 90 million gallons. So yes, there is an improvement. And
so what
I
I
want to continue with that. And what I'm suggesting is that we take additional actions to make that even more improvement.
So what I'm pulling up here is data that was prepared by our engineer in 2020. So there are some gaps in it. It's not up to date by any stretch of the imagination, but it does show a trend line year over year. 2018, you see our loss was 60% plus, topping out, it looks like here, 65% in 2018. In 2019, we did have another high quarter at 66%. Then it fell down to 50 in the high 50s before finally dropping out here in the first quarter of 2020 at 49%. So there are some quarters that need to be filled in on this spreadsheet. Like I said, the engineer prepared this back in the beginning of 2020. However, we've had multiple water main breaks this year. We had several in the last week because of the water main work. So it's been there. The data will reflect that as far as water loss is concerned. But the trend is that we are working in the right direction, and that's thanks to the tireless work of Mr. Kevin Bell to identify leaks using the equipment that we have, and work with other community or work with the Rural Water Authority to use their high-tech equipment at no cost to the village to identify leaks that we might not otherwise be able to identify.
Okay. Since it is not appropriate for me to speak with the committee members without it being a committee meeting, I will use a committee meeting to say to the, I will challenge these numbers provided by the engineer. I have taken the numbers that you have provided. I have spent a considerable amount of time on them, and I would challenge them. And in fact, the chart that I provided in the last meeting, I would say is accurate. That aside, I understand what you're saying. I simply feel that we need to recognize that there is a significant opportunity, and it should be addressed in a manner that could get us to a target sometime in the not too distant future.
Jeff, can I kick in on that?
Yes.
We've been kicking this can down the road for a long time. If we don't set a goal, we'll never get there. I think Jeff's goal of reduction down to 15% in 3 years is a accomplishable goal, and I think we should at least have that goal. We can always come back and revise it, but we need a goal. If we don't have a goal, you're just floundering out in the middle of the ocean. So I would suggest that the committee would keep the fact that there is a goal that is set by the committee, and that goal should be a ambitious goal, because we're losing $150,000 a year, and if we say that's 3 more years, we're talking again $500,000 worth of loss that we cannot afford. And so the quicker we get on this and the quicker we get a solution, even if we can't make 15%, but we end up getting it down to where we're losing 20%, that's better than losing 50. And that saves us $75,000. So I want to keep the goal at 15% by 2024. Thank you.
This is Marilyn. Let me just weigh in, and forgive my being technical, but I'd like to, in order for this, in my mind, to be preserved as something coming from the Utilities Committee, I think we need what Alan and Jeff has been saying in the form of a motion. Alan has said it, and I'd like to second that motion so that it is captured in the minutes of this meeting as an actionable item in the form of a motion. Otherwise, the discussion ambles on and on and on. So is that acceptable to Alan and Jeff, and also you, Don and Dave?
I have no problem with that.
Then in the form of a motion, I second Alan's motion and ask the chair of the committee to call for a vote on it.
Do I have a vote to approve the motion suggested by Mr. Howeller? All in favor, say aye.
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 And Jeff,
Motion carried.
what that means is that we take this to council.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you both. If you'll move on, please. The next topic on the, if you will, please scroll down, David, to the review of enterprise revenues.
Is this what you're looking for?
No, I'm sorry, I don't see it. I'm looking for, no, I don't think I gave, I'm looking at the chart you put up a few moments ago.
This one?
No, sir. I still have the same chart, no change.
I'm not sure which one you're referring to. The three that I have are what I've scrolled through here.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's just go on to, if I may, let's just start with verbally with them. The next topic on the agenda is the review of enterprise revenues. And as I noted there, the balance on December 31st was $1,219,000. On the end of January, 1 month later, the balance improved to $1,361,000. That is on the agenda that you have in front of you, those numbers, rather than me just verbalizing them. And the interesting point is that the fund balances for the enterprise increased in January, in spite of the fact that we paid the Treasurer of Ohio and the OWDA $300,000. That's great. We have $1.36 million in our checking account. And as we were speaking just a few moments ago regarding the costs, I think with this kind of reserve, if we need to invest in a little extra manpower or resources to adjust the water issues, then I suggest that we can afford it. We are accumulating a reserve faster than we anticipated when the rate increase was approved, excuse me.
Jeff, are you saying then you think we should not do a rate increase?
Let's move down to the answer I'm saying is that I think that it's something we will need to review sooner than we anticipated in our committee meeting in October of 2019. The reason is, again, we have $1.3 million in the bank. We paid our first payment for this year, and we have increased rates coming in the March meter reading. I think that we will be prudent for us in terms of comments from the village in social media and to ourselves that to confirm that our rates are correct, are equitable, and are at the lowest possible cost to the resident.
Let me ask, Jeff, is there a spreadsheet or something that you wanted to show us that David may not have readily available or something?
I think if you'll put down that chart B, David, please.
And while David is doing that, let me ask for confirmation, really. It's my understanding that we, the village, are locked in to the current rate increase that is in effect today until the end of this calendar year. Is that correct, Don and David?
Well, it is based on a rate increase that was passed by council in an ordinance 2-3 years ago.
Correct.
So yes, I mean that we have 1 more year to go. We had what we did was for the water, we did no increase in the base amount, and which is for the first 100 cubic feet of water. And then after that, for each, at some level, we took it up to $2
I can
plus
assist.
change.
Excuse me, if you look at the chart that is on your screen, that will help you identify.
That's a good
that.
point. Okay,
Thank you.
so we took it up $2 for each additional 100 cubic feet in 2020 and 2021. And then after that, we have a 4% rate increase slated for 2022. I don't believe the ordinance went beyond 2022, did it, David?
It does not. The ordinance, the last effective rate change would be effective 1/1/2022.
Right. So there are after 2022, this ordinance does not call for any further rate increases.
So let me ask for clarity. The last rate increase goes into effect on January 1, 2022. Yes?
Correct. That is a 4% increase.
Okay, so that particular 4% increase may be revisited by this committee and council. It has not gone into effect yet. So it's a matter of whether council has the will to change that ordinance or to modify that rate increase. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, I'm looking for opportunities. That's what I'm trying to do. See what opportunities we have here. So we are locked into the current rate throughout this calendar year. But in the course of this calendar year, the Utilities Committee and Council may revisit and modify the rate to go into effect on January 1st, 2022.
No. January 1st, 2023.
No, it would be effective January 1st, 2022.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, you're correct, Marilyn.
thank you.
I stand.
Okay, if I may, I'd like to, so we can move on with it, and perhaps some of these questions will be answered in the discussion. The topic on the agenda was to review rate increase schedule and modify if appropriate. And I do recognize we won't modify it, would not modify it today, but simply to bring it up for discussion, because it is our responsibility and obligation to try to structure this pricing as fairly and equitably as possible. So what you're looking at on the chart on the screen right now, and you've seen it before, I'm going to show it to you again. The top series of numbers, if you'll look where it says volume over base, it says there's a 0 there. And what that means is that if you are one of the residents using your allotted amount of water, that is, I'm going to call it 10 units. So we don't get into gallons, we don't get into cubic feet. For $67.91, you get 10 units at no additional cost. And if you look at 2019, it was $67.91. 2020, it's $67.91. 2021, et cetera. And we deliberately tried to avoid putting any increase at the base level. However, if you look at the second column over, the additional units that you buy went from $4.30 in 2019 to $6.30 in the year past, and effective next month, the next meter reading is going to cost you $8.30 for any additional unit. Well, if you are using the minimum, if you come over to the far column on the chart there, you'll see what the rates would be in 2019, 2020, and 21. So in 2021, if you're not using any additional water, your bill will be $191.90 per quarter. And that does not include Rumpke. That's just water and sewer. 35% of the readings are 10 units or less. Many are less than 10 units. That means somebody else is using those 10 units and being billed for them because they need them. So if you look at the second table, the number in the column volume over base, I keep putting my cursor on it on my screen, but you can't see that. The number on that is 5 additional units. That 5 additional units is very conservative minimum average for 65% of the meter readings that are not in the 50 to 60 unit class. The point being that if you're a household with a couple of children, somebody who showers often, etc., we all either have those or have experienced them in their families. If you use a minimum of 5 additional units and you come over here, you'll find that your bill in 2020 will be, if you use 5 additional units, will be $255.89. In 2021, it'll be $272. So if you look at that compared to 2019 on the same table, 2019 was $239.85. Then it went to $255, and then it'll go to $272 if you happen to use 5 additional units. And that is not exceptional. That is a very fair minimum average if you use more than the minimum. So one of the issues that I wrote that letter about, or suggestion, was that we need to not say to people who speak with us and perhaps directly to the village that this is not a 3% increase. If you look at the totals there and do your math, if you happen to use more than the minimum, your increase is more than 3%. So with that increase, one of the issues is that we used to charge you less if you needed to use extra water. Your first units cost you $6.79 a piece. Now they cost you $6.79 a piece. But your extra units now cost you twice as much, nearly, at $8.30 versus $4.30 16 months ago. That's a considerable increase. It's necessary, potentially, to maintain the necessary revenues. I think it, in fact, is going to be a little more than necessary. We might want to review that, but to some extent, it means if you have a family and you don't have a choice, you're not filling your pool, you're not using the water to wash your car necessarily, you need to draw extra water. It now costs you twice as much as it used to, or approximately twice as much as it used to. I'm not sure that that's the best approach. I think that we need to consider reviewing that. Any comments, please?
Jesus. Yes, Jeff, I agree wholeheartedly with you. We do need to reconsider. We do need to review this. And I understand you're not looking to go into depth in this particular meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Let me ask, who is needed to meet with this committee in order for us to review the rate and the structure? Because as I recall, 2 years ago, we met with the,
The engineer, perhaps, Marilyn?
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you, David. Yes. Who helped us with this rate structure that we have. Now that we have the experience and not just hypotheticals based upon realities, of course, I think that we may want to have the engineer with us, who was with us before, to help us reassess this. I wouldn't want council elected officials to meet and devoid of the engineer and reach some conclusion without that expertise in the room or at the table with us, and then have perhaps the engineer and staff or whomever reach a different conclusion later. I think that is counterproductive. I'd rather have the key people in the room at the same time. And when I say in the room, I mean in the meeting.
I would agree with you there, Marilyn. As the incoming operator of the utility, I would err on the side of substantial study into the effect that any adjustment to this rate schedule would have on estimated future revenues, especially in light of what this committee wants to accomplish over the next 4 years. We have, the leak detection work is not going to be affordable necessarily. It depends on what we have to do. We have to identify that. That's going to take engineering expense and collaboration with other entities. Additionally, the CMOM project has the potential to be a substantial cost against our revenues. So I also look forward to potential water main replacements for interior mains as a potential issue. If we identify leaks in those interior mains, I'm referring to those within the sort of the heart of the historic district. So the Fountain Avenue main, for instance, that I would hope that should we need to pursue loan funding to replace those mains, that the funding would be available, the revenue would be available for us to be able to do that. While I certainly understand and speak with residents on a daily basis when it comes to the price of their water bill, I answer the phone at the village office along with Sally and Wally, and we get phone calls from folks who are very frustrated by their bills, and work with them if they have situations that are causing them to go up. But we have to identify that unfortunately our utility is aging and it needs replacement, wholesale replacement in some aspects. So that requires revenue to do that, and so that we can provide the utility that our residents have come to expect and enjoy. So I would agree with you that having the engineer at the table is a necessary step in order to identify if adjustments to the previously approved rate increase is something that's warranted.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right.
Yeah, I just want to add to David that David, you'll be working with us in this capacity in the coming months. And I'd like you to know that it would be helpful for you to come to the table with more than just the need to spend money, because there is always a legitimate need. You're looking at people who have been trying to help balance the budget and come up with a balanced budget for the village for years. So we're accustomed to hearing of the to spend money, of the need to fix this, of the need to repair that. So I think what we'll need to see is, of all these competing needs, what are the priorities? And that's what Jeff has been trying to isolate. And how are these priorities being met with resources so that we can realistically talk about this rate structure that's adversely impacting our residents? I know you're answering those phone calls. I've been in the village too, and I've heard them. And I get the residents asking me about them as well. So I think we'll need to really work real hard at this. That's all I'm trying to say.
Oh, I completely agree with you there, Marilyn. And when I've identified those needs, and that's with the help of the engineer, and as we get further along in the CMOM project, that's a massive priority. It's an EPA mandate that we pursue it. So that's going to spell out a substantial priority for us, as well as leak detection to reduce water loss to 15% in 2024, as the committee this afternoon has identified. Might identify for us opportunities to complete work. So by all means, once that evidence is compiled, it will be presented to the committee. There's no reason to think otherwise.
Thank you.
I've got one more question for David before we move on.
Mhm.
David, when is the first original loan on the Waterworks sunset?
Let me see here. Make sure I'm looking at my right chart here. So we have a loan that expires in the most recent one to expire will come up in July of 2022.
Okay. So after that, we will have paid off the original Waterworks plant renovation, and that's been how many years? 20?
Yeah, that's a 20-year. That'll be 20 years in 2022.
Okay.
And
So
I think there's also a loan that matures, is paid off in 2023. Is that not right, David?
That's correct as well. We have a second loan for the first loan is for $75,000 per year. The second is $72,750.
And that's one of the reasons why we delayed putting in the new water main on Sharon as long as we did,
Correct.
is so that we could pay off the loan that would be necessary to do Sharon Road from the money that we are no longer spending on the 2022 and 2023 loans.
okay.
We don't know for sure at this point. We kind of hope we're going to come out ahead on that deal, although probably not a lot, just because interest rates have gone down so much.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Is the loan being adjusted?
I beg your pardon?
Is the loan APR is being adjusted for the rates, or is the rate fixed?
Well, okay. The rates on the Sharon Avenue loan, I believe, are set at 1.34%. That's a number that sticks in my mind.
Yes.
Anyway, and the rates on the other two loans were considerably higher than that. Again, I don't remember what they were specifically, but they were higher. So that's what I was referring to when I said rates have gone down. But no, we're not going to be able to get a change in the rate on Sharon Avenue, which is really a very good rate anyway.
Sure. My question was, before you were the mayor, Mr. Mayor, could we pay off that debt, because we had inherited a nice sum of money from the Carruthers, and I was told that we cannot prepay that debt.
That is correct.
That's what I was told also.
That is correct.
Did we ever say to them, well, we want to prepay this debt? Let's renegotiate? Because right now, we ought to borrow the money to pay it off, because it'd save us 1% interest.
Prepayment is not an option under OPWC loans.
I understand that, but maybe they'd renegotiate that. Save us 2 years worth of interest, even though it is low. I will cede to the chairman of this committee.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, if we can move on to the next item on the agenda, please, billing structure review. And David, if you would bring up chart C, I think it is, for me, please. The village is unique, and I may have said this in the last meeting because I've expressed it to myself and to others, and I'm not sure it's in the meeting, so I'm going to say it again. And that is that we acknowledge that Glendale is unique. It's a little island of green, a little island of a great village of unique relationships among the people. And we're unique in a couple of other ways. And one of those is we're unique and we don't have an income tax. Nearly every village within a driving reach has an income tax. We do not. We're unique. We also have another unique function, which is in the enterprise, and that is that we tend to bill every household, every business, every meter, if I may, with the same minimum charge, and that is unique. Virtually every other village water company charges additional if you are either a apartment building, a multifamily home, a commercial building, etc. Those companies, those cities use something called a meter. They would say you have a 5/8 inch meter, it's called, or you have a 3/4 inch meter, or you have a 1 inch meter. And that simply means that if you have a large building with showers, commodes, sinks, cooking, etc. in it, then you have a different pipe, a different water line, or different meter coming into your house. And so, for example, in my home, I probably have a 1/2 inch meter. However, if we took that same line and put it into a building like Princeton Elementary School and said, here's this household meter, this household water line that will adequately provide water to the kitchen, to the bathrooms, etc., it won't work. So they charge you more for a larger meter, a larger water line. And that's how they measure whether you're a bigger entity, whether you're a bigger customer or not. We uniquely treat every customer the same, and that is that you're charged the same amount for your water rate and the base of your water rate, and we're charged the same amount for your wastewater issues. So if we look at the chart that you see there, maybe you could make it a little larger, if you don't mind, David, enlarge it, if you will, please. Thank you. That's fine, right there. The heading, as you see, says water on it. And I've reduced these all on the left-hand column. You'll see that that's the billing cycle for each community. For Cincinnati, they bill every month. For most of the other communities, they bill every 3 months, with the exception of Lockland, billing 2. We bill 3. But what I have done is come over here to the column, and it says the charge per billing cycle. That meaning whether you bill on 3 month cycle or 1 month cycle. I'm sorry, next column over. Whether you bill on 1 month cycle or 3 month cycle, this is the cost per unit for your water. And you'll see that in Cincinnati, if you have a single family home, you pay $7.59 plus $3.49 per extra unit of water. However, if you have a 2-family home or apartment, or a home divided into 2 separate entities, that is, you're a landlord, then you pay a small additional fee. In this case, it's what, $1.50 that's per month. If you look at Glendale, if you have a 2-unit home, that's row 10, column E and column F, you see that you pay $22.24 per month. And if you have 2 units, that is 2 apartments on the same line, or 3 or 4 apartments on the same line, that is 4 different families, we still only bill $22.64. Every other community charges more. You'll see the Indian Hill charges more. And if you'll follow column F down, you'll see that each community charges an additional fee for a larger pipe or meter into your home. Over in the far column is your charge for additional water. And you'll see that Cincinnati charges $3.49 for additional unit. We charge $8.30. Indian Hill charges $4.49. Lockland charges $4.04. Wyoming, like ourselves, charges $6.57, a little higher. And Cleves, a community similar to ours, charges similar rates. Point being that that's for 2 units. For a larger meter, you're charged a premium. If you have a still larger demand, that is, if you have an apartment building or your commercial building like elementary school, St. Gabe's, Bethany, the other entities, there is an additional charge because you're servicing more than one family. So we charge every commercial as though it's a single family, every family. This could be reviewed. It's an equitable way to approach additional revenue and requesting that larger community, commercial type entities, landlords, et cetera, will pay a little additional fee. If you'll scroll down, please, David, to the next one. The same result happens with your wastewater. I won't read them all to you again. I hope that you understand what I did, but we charge the base per month charge, that's column F for wastewater. Glendale charges $39.74. And correct me if I'm wrong, David, because I asked you the other day, we charge the same rate for the gymnasium at Bethany, $39.74.
Yes, we do. We charge, as you're, to summarize it quickly, that yes, we do charge the same minimum and the same usage regardless of meter size.
Okay, thank you. So my point is that the illustration on the screen here shows you additional charges for a household with 2 families. When it's a larger entity, the charge increases further. Where we charge exactly the same rate for 2 families, Indian Hill charges an additional $11 per quarter. Or if you're even, and you'll see the plus sign there. I did not do this for each community, but that's if you have 4 units or more, they charge you a flat charge of $69. So for 1 family, it's $39. For a 4-family unit, it's $69, plus the regular commodity usage charge, it's called. That is the extra units you use. So this chart is provided for you as a comparison to point out that we charge less for units using multiple families, commercial buildings, et cetera, than we charge a single family. And I think that that could be considered as an adjustment along with reviewing the rates we discussed earlier in this conversation.
I'd like to jump in and temper expectations a touch. That we have approximately 1,011 accounts in the village.
Yes.
Of those, 981 of them are residential accounts. So those are water meters that are 3/4 of an inch or thereabouts. The standard water meter for a residence is 3/4 of an inch. It used to be 5/8. We've recently upped that. Well, recently in the last, I would say 10 years or so, that's been increased to 3/4 of an inch. So this would affect about 30 of our customers based on those numbers. So while an increase certainly does make sense for larger meters, larger commercial users, I would be hesitant to say that it would be enough to offset an adjustment to our rate schedule if this were to be investigated or pursued.
Okay, I understand that David and I went through the billing for the last couple of years, as you are aware, and I understand that we don't have a significant amount of commercial buildings. However, if there's a difference of $10 a quarter, $40 a year times however many customers there are, subsequently, gradually that adds up to additional revenue that I think for example, it's not much money when you consider a multi-million-dollar enterprise, but that might pay for an extra fire hydrant every once in a while if we had that extra revenue. It's pennies in dollars, but it's still money that every other community charges. And once again, we're unique because we don't. I think we should consider that. I think that's any comments from committee, others? No comments. Okay.
Yes, of course there are comments. Once again, Jeff, you and David have both made sense. And if we're looking at impact, I hear David saying the bottom line dollar impact is negligible. Is that correct, David?
I wouldn't say negligible, only because I don't have the data in front of me. It would depend on how much we would want to increase multiple unit users or larger meter users. So I'd be hesitant to say it's negligible, but it certainly would not be a substantial offset in our, it wouldn't be a substantial increase in our revenues compared to what these units, because these are larger meters, these are large amounts of water that they use on a quarterly basis. They already pay a substantial amount. I think it would be, to borrow a phrase, a drop in a bucket compared to their regular water bill.
So that leads me to wonder, of our revenue from commercial users versus residential users, what is the relationship percentage-wise in terms of of revenue coming into the village? Yes, we do. We only have a few commercial users, and we have only a few, and yet most of our users are residential.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just wondering, what does that data look like, David?
Maybe I could provide some help with that. That as part actually of the CMOM application for the planning loan, we provided revenue information to the EPA. And as a part of that, let me find it here. Annual revenue per users for our residential and commercial accounts is about $777. For other, and those are the 3 schools that are located in the village, it's about an annual amount of about $5,500. Now, based on what the charts are here, it looks like that the effect would be placed on the base charge, the minimum bill. Is that right, Jeff?
Yes, that's what other organizations do. Yes.
So then we would realize, if we, let's say we use those 3 schools because they do have larger meters, that we would be looking at anywhere from 3 to maybe, depending on how many meters they have on their properties, maybe a total of 10 meters at the absolute most that would see an increase in their base billing as a result of something like this.
Let me also ask David and Jeff, what additional hardware would these multiple users need if we were to increase and charge more for each unit? If any additional hardware.
We're not proposing we charge more for each unit, Marilyn. What I'm suggesting is that if you are a larger organization and there is an apartment at the corner of Sharon and Greenfield or Coral that has 4 apartments in it, they pay the same minimum fee as you for 4 households. So I'm suggesting that if you have 4 households, that you should be charged a little more consistent with other communities. As a matter of fact, if I may drift back just quickly to water, the policy in Wyoming, and I think Wally would confirm, I hope would confirm this, the policy in Wyoming is if you have a 2-unit home, each home, each unit, each residence is charged the minimum water, even though there's only one water line coming in. You pay twice the amount of the minimum in Wyoming, but of course you get twice the amount of water. It doesn't matter which household uses it because it's on 1 meter, on 1 line. So they don't try to measure, does Bill use more water than Sally? They simply say, okay, you both pay the minimum and the water is billed, you use it however you wish. So the point I'm saying is that Wyoming is far more aggressive. And we are the only ones that have a wastewater plant. You know, we're burdened with that, or blessed, how you want to look at it in terms of the issues with it. Virtually everybody else uses the Metropolitan Sewer District. We don't want to be involved with that. They wouldn't have us. But I don't think it's unreasonable for us to recognize that additional charges may be necessary for larger users. Enough said.
So to close up my question, Jeff, I hear you saying that regardless of how many units there are, only 1 meter is needed, and the additional charge is levied based upon the number of units. And that charge is a flat rate, whatever it is. Is that correct, Jeff?
I think that's correct, if I understand you correctly. The base charge remains the same, or it's larger than a single residential, you pay a premium, but there's only 1 meter involved.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments?
Well, I think this is something that we could put on the table when we look at that rate review later this year.
Yes.
And that will give us some time to really think about this and the impact on the users, as well as the impact on the village, on the enterprise.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Next topic on the agenda, the financial reporting. I have requested in previous meetings or discussed and proposed that we have for the enterprise quarterly report of revenues, expenditures, account balances, et cetera. I don't necessarily, I'm not implying we need a detailed P&L, but I would, rather than waiting a year to see where we end up, I would like to suggest that we have a quarterly report. Again, revenues, what we paid, and simply a total of the check register, a total of what we billed. I'd like to see what our account balance is. I did get the account balances from the treasurer with each quarter. I know it only changes radically twice a year when we pay our debt service. The other quarters, there won't be much change, but as I look at the check registers, the cash receipts or the cash report, and the various reports and trying to consolidate them, it's very, I'm not sure I do it correctly. So
as the one that will be responsible for preparing this report,
Yes.
I want to provide some background here. And this is going to be a little bit grander scale than just enterprise. That one of my goals is to update and consolidate our financial reporting. Every month council receives a stack of paper that has a revenue report, an expenditure report, and a cash transactions report, along with check registers for our general fund checking and our enterprise fund checking. So the information that you're looking for, Jeff, is in those reports. It's just a matter of consolidating it, which is something that we're going to be doing for all of our funds and all of our accounts. And certainly something that everybody can look forward to as we move forward with the next couple of months here. So it's, I know tonight the popular answer has not been kick the can down the road, but kick the can down the road, it's coming. I will actually be working with everybody, setting some time up once I get settled in to come up with maybe some expectations of what folks would like to see, how they'd like those reports to be formatted, those kinds of things, so that everybody's getting the most current, but also the most beneficial information, so that it saves time for us in the office reporting what we need to report, and everybody can understand what they're receiving as well.
Let me just jump in quickly here. David's not giving himself enough credit here, and I want to make sure we all understand it. He is going to face a really massive task in the transition, and I don't put blame on anyone else, but he's going to have a lot on his plate as he does the transition. And part of it is, though, to really upgrade substantially the transparency and simplicity of our financial reporting. He and I have talked about this in the past. We're going to a whole new accounting system in the next year, in this year. I didn't mean next 2022, I mean 2021. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a massive undertaking. There are going to be some growing pains as we go along, but at the end of the day, our goal and target and aspiration is to have reports that are simpler and easier to understand for everyone, including me. And so that is going to take place, and in the process, we will certainly look at improving the reporting on enterprise fund.
Yeah, and as we go through that, to borrow a phrase, pardon our dust, as we work through creating those. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take some work, but I think my ultimate goal is to make the budgeting process simpler. So if we can get built up to that point, then we should, I think we'll be in good shape.
David,
Yes.
I two questions. One, the confirmation. I hear you and Don saying that we are going to a different software program. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, great. Secondly, I want to ask, will you or Don or whomever ensure that the software program we migrate to is acceptable and complies with the Ohio Auditor's Office, so that when they come to audit our books and our records, so to speak, we're not arguing with them over software. And they do suggest various things to be included, but this is not a free-for-all at this end, at our end.
I'm going to make your day, Marilyn. We are switching to the Uniform Accounting Network, which is the state auditors, and it is their accounting network. It will simplify so much of what we do. It does not do utility billing. So for the purposes of this committee, rather, that will be something we will investigate later on this year. I'm asking that we might, if there's the potential for it that we might wait until 2022 before we push that, if only because we've got enough change going on this year. But we will be switching over to UAN as it's known, which the auditors will vastly prefer and will make our processes in the office a little bit smoother when it comes to reporting and those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any additional comments? Thank you. The last item on the agenda is it has been suggested on occasion that we might develop an enterprise mission statement. And there are, if you go to websites, again, in other communities, you'll notice that there are mission statements. And I think that might be a good idea to consider one. I simply to say the mission of the enterprise is to provide consistent, clean, safe water at the lowest possible cost. That's very limited, very simple, but I'd like to suggest that we consider creating one, if not at this meeting, by the next meeting.
Can I suggest, Jeff, you put that in writing?
Okay, we'll do that. Any further comments? Marilyn, I don't know if you were speaking. You're muted.
I was just laughing at Alan for being technical. But yes, I agree with him.
Okay, thank you. I don't think that requires a motion of any kind. Do we still have persons who want to speak to the committee?
We do. Let's see. Mr. Kevin Parrish has raised his hand, and we also have Ms. Cindy Taylor as well. So at your leisure, Chair.
That's why we start off with Mr. Parrish real quick. And that will be the usual 5-minute requirement.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I am really enthusiastic about the questions that were raised by this group on issues of the water. I'm surprised that on all the graphs that you guys had on the board that the graph of the CMOM was not given to you guys. It explains a lot of things, especially since it was part of the documentation from the letter dated August 26, 2020, Village of Glendale to the Ohio EPA, signed by Mayor. The CMOM, which is the DEFA document for the loan, it has definite answers for you guys, or so that you can point your questions in a certain area. For example, on the planning loan, the estimated loan award date is 1/1 of 2021 for $62,500, and the design loan estimated loan award date is 9/1/2021 of $110,000. Now, these are the documents that were submitted by Village Administrator Wally Cordes with Stephen Cantor as the environmental specialist that is helping you guys navigate through this. And it has lots of things that are just, it's not even a completed form for the application. But if any of you guys need this document, which comes from the Ohio EPA public records, I'll provide it for you so you'll be better prepared to ask questions the next time. Now, in addressing water issues with the Village of Glendale, let me read you something also from the Ohio EPA. And it is a letter directed to Mr. Walter Cordes, Village of Glendale, September 6, 2005. And it addressed water issues. And it says, Glendale must consider expanding and modernizing its water treatment plant and raw water capacity. If Glendale wishes to continue supplying its customers with groundwater and not with surface water provided by the Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, the village must understand that operating above, at, or close to the water treatment plant in well-filled capacity is not a good practice, even if it does constitute an OAC violation. However, this kind of operation may facilitate conditions to incur an OAC violation, such as water pressure loss or water quality problems. It also goes on to say that about the inadequacy of this system that we're working with. Now we go to another letter, August 18, 2020, which is transmitted electronically to Mayor Lofty in response to the teleconference meeting with the Ohio EPA concerning sanitary sewer systems overflows and wastewater treatment plant bypasses. It goes on to say that basically that this is a reoccurring problem and that we need to prioritize that. Now we haven't prioritized it in over 15 years, and you're not prioritizing it in the CMOM. The CMOM is inadequate because it does not address the issue. We have a massive problem here, and the problem is that we have a system which only had a life expectancy of 50 years, and yet it's over 100 years that we're using it. It has cracks and faults in this system that cannot be repaired. They have to be replaced. On the phase 1 sanitary sewer project, Glendale was addressing some issues and making some repairs. Out of all the streets that and work that they were having done, they had only one street earmarked for replacement. That was Cole Avenue. They did not replace that. But when they had it opened up, I've got massive pictures of the amount of damage and what we're dealing with. But I couldn't get public records from our village because of their concealment of this. They said that we had no contractors working on that, but I have pictures. Anybody who wants to see those will see what we're working with here. The conspiracy and the lies and corruption that is expressed because of this cover-up is just massive. But right now we're going to be in the court of claims, and there will be an audit of our public record system just to get clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is Ms. Taylor still available?
It looks like she has dropped out of the meeting.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to continue this meeting for another half hour?
I have a question. This is the second or perhaps third time I've heard mention of Court of Claims. And I'd simply like to know, as a matter of fact, has the village received any legal notice through the courts that a complaint of any nature has been filed against our enterprise system or our enterprise or the village itself for its enterprise system within the past 6 months?
No.
No, we have not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I made the offer of extending the meeting another 30 minutes. Do I hear anybody in favor? I guess not. Well, then why don't we adjourn? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I move to adjourn.
No, I move we adjourn.
Thank you all.
Jeff, that was a nice job. You've done your homework.
Yes.
Good meeting, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Jeff.
You
Thank you
too,
all.
Dave. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.